Hi, I'm Kathleen, and welcome to some very cool bonus content for the Guild of Ravnica pre-release. I'm joined by Cameron, Hallie, and Serge, and we're all going to talk about what it was like to build our sealed pools, except for Serge, who was our judge, so he's just going to tell us what we did wrong during the event.
Nobody played wrong. It was actually, I'm really impressed with how many mechanics were introduced, and how many new cards came out, and how well people played. Not a lot of misplays, not a lot of problems, for what seems to be a fairly complex set. So well done, everyone.
Yay, go team. So what did you guys all pick? I, of course, went Dimir. Hallie?
I picked Selesnya.
I chose Izzet.
And you guys are all, or both of you, were able to build the guild pools that you wanted?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So, that was really curious. I mean, I didn't get a chance to build, but how much did your seeded pack influence your overall deck building? Did it feel like it contributed to it? Does that choice matter when you go to your pre-release?
Oh, yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't wind up playing my seeded rare, which was Firemind's Research.
What does that one do?
It's blue and red for an enchantment. When you
Oh.
cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Firemind's Research. One in a blue, remove 2 charge counters, draw a card. One in a red, remove 5, deal 5.
That seems like a commander card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just didn't have enough spells? You just like, this doesn't do enough in limited?
I mean, I was running like 10 instants and sorceries. But this does not do like no, it doesn't do anything, right?
Not in limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was thinking maybe I need to reevaluate it with Jumpstart. Maybe casting 1 Jumpstart spell and then jumpstarting it. That's 2 tokens.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's 2 tokens. That's still
Build around.
Yeah, but in these cases, you'd probably just want another instant or sorcery.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, there are more efficient and easier ways to draw cards and to deal damage in those colors.
I realized the second one is remove 5 counters.
Yes.
If it was 2 and 2, but 5.
That's
Yeah.
a lot.
Anyway, like the value in the seeded pack was not in the rare for me. It was in the commons, basically, like the meat and potatoes of your deck. It definitely helps to center your deck and help you to find the cards that make each of these quite synergistic strategies hum.
Yeah, I found the same thing. Like my Dimir pack was very good. Like my seeded rare was very cool. It was Etrata. And she was great. I used her once and she exiled a creature, which I'm like, done, win. But my seeded pack was so good, and like the rest of my pool was already like a good blue-black pool that I was just like, I'm not even gonna look at my red and white because I don't care, because the stakes have never been lower. Just play a Dimir deck.
Right. Yeah, my pool was pretty kind to me as well. My seeded pack had a lot of really good Selesnya commons and uncommons that really pushed me into that color pair. And I only really started looking at other colors when I opened good rares and other colors. Like I opened a Tajik and I saw, oh, well, Tajik is pretty easy to splash, especially since I had one of the Boros lockets. So I was able to splash that. And then I had 2 Prey-Upons in my pool as well. And I thought, well, you know, if you have Tajik and you also have Prey-Upon, then because Tajik prevents non-combat damage to creatures, then it's just a one-sided fight. Then your creature deals damage and it can't be dealt damage
Your
back.
Prey-Upon becomes a punch.
Exactly, yeah.
Very
No
nice.
longer fighting the one-side effect there. That's very interesting. What was your seeded rare?
It was Tristani.
Oh, wow.
Tristani was very good.
Which one is that again?
So it's a
Tristani the Discordant.
Tristani the Discordant. So she is a 1/4, or they are a 1/4. They give other creatures +1/+1, and when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. And at the beginning of your end step, each player gains control of all creatures they own, which didn't seem super relevant in this format. But having this with other effects that make tokens just meant that you could go really wide.
Yeah, the Anthem effect is very powerful.
Well, I mean, like, they enter as a 1/4 for 5, but you also get, because they buff the other creatures that you also get 2 2/2s. So you're getting 5 power for 5 mana.
Toughness.
Yeah.
I suppose it's a bit like Regal Caracal. Only it doesn't make more people, but it buffs your entire team,
Oh, then
not
that,
just
was
cats.
that was the cat friend.
Yeah, from Amonkhet.
Right.
Yeah, and Yeah, and of course there's the last clause, which I'm sure is super relevant in a standard meta with hostage taker in it.
Yep.
Was there any reanimator in this set? I didn't see
There's
it during
a
the
little
pre-release.
bit
There's
in Golgari.
there's also a Dimir split card.
Oh, I didn't see that.
That
I
like
remember
takes
that.
control of things, like a mind control effect.
Oh,
or-
you were. I thought you were asking about Reanimator.
Sorry, both. I was just wondering how relevant and limited the 1/4's ability to regain control of stuff. So there's like two. Can you reanimate your own creatures, or can you reanimate your opponent's creatures?
It's reanimate your own thing. I think.
So not super relevant.
No, but I mean, like, I feel like the rest of the body and text on that card
Yeah.
is more than good
Pretty
enough
good. Yep.
to be like, all right, that's fine. What I thought was really interesting, speaking of sort of like seeded things, is that they have a whole cycle of uncommons for the guilds that are very hard to cast. Although
Yeah.
not that hard to cast because there's lots of guild gates going around, and then there's the lockets, and there's some fixing that's slower and stuff like that. But for example, the one for my guild, Dimir, is Nightveil Predator, which is a flying death touch hexproof creature for
That's a lot of
4. It is a
keywords.
3/3.
Those are 3 very good keywords.
That is yes. This creature performed extremely well.
So all of these uncommons for all of the guilds are 4 mana. And they all have the double pips on color. So not very splashable. But
No.
sorry, continue on that one.
Yeah, well, these are the payoffs for going all in on your guild. I had 2 Crackling Drakes, which is the Izzet analog. It's a star 4 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you get to draw a card, and its power is equal to the number of instants and sorceries you own in the graveyard and in exile.
Wow.
And
So
in exile.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So it's not a non-bow with jumpstart, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, it's very deliberately designed to work with Jumpstart. So I think I got this up to 8 power
Wow.
during my
Yeah.
last game.
I remember that. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It draws you a card.
Yeah.
What's the one for Selesnya?
So it's Conclave Cavalier, which is a 4/4 with Vigilance. Vigilance, by the way, super relevant in Selesnya because of Convoke. So you can attack and then tap it after combat to then convoke something out. The great thing about this card, though, is that it replaces itself really well. When it dies, you get 2/2/2 green and white Elf Knight tokens, also with Vigilance, so even more things to convoke with.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot. That's a good value creature.
Yep. Yep. It's very, very good.
Well, and these all seem quite large by the standards of this draft environment, right? Like getting Conclave Cavalier off the battlefield is not going to be an easy task for many decks.
No, I noticed that the Dimir deck is definitely lower on the power scale. You have a lot of like for my big payoff is a 3/3. There's lots of 2/3s and like a 3/5 and like just there's stuff that you can do, but it tends to start out a little bit lower on the power. So like when a 4/4 hits the battlefield, it's like, oh, that's actually quite problematic.
Dimir has very good removal, though.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, like they have the double
take.
black.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the 5-ish mana double black sorcery conditionless removal
Yes.
common spell.
Yeah, which was I had 2 of them. Deadly Visit.
Yeah.
With Surveil 2, which is a very good mechanic that I will definitely get wrong and think it's scry, and I will put things on the bottom of my deck. Although I think it's actually much more powerful to be able to put things into your yard.
Yeah.
I mean, just even outside of the standard environment, right?
Well, graveyard matters a lot in this set. You can use it to set up Jumpstart. You can use it to set up Undergrowth. An important ruling note for Surveil: if you're playing this at your own pre-release, you're playing with the cards at home. Make sure you read all of the Surveil cards carefully. For some cards, you'll do an effect and then Surveil. So, for example, Deadly Visit, destroy a creature and then Surveil. But there was a draw spell you played in the pre-release, Kathleen.
Notion Rain.
Notion Rain, where you surveil first and then you draw. So it's important that you take those cards and you follow it sequentially, because order matters.
Yeah, notably the Dimir Reanimator card surveils first and then reanimates.
Because you might be able to surveil a target creature to reanimate off that and then choose it at the other half.
It's very cool. A thing I noted about Notion Rain when I was playing it is that I found, at least maybe this is not going to be representative of how the whole format goes, but at least certainly my deck tended to just like try to gum up the ground But then like sort of just dig yourself in and then just creak out incremental advantage, particularly in the battle against I had against Sam and a little bit against Graham, but he sort of ran me over with huge Selesnya dude. And the taking 2 life off Notion Rain was a real issue for me towards the end of the match. I was just like, oh, I'm at 6 and I'm starting to deal with thin margins here. So it's not necessarily like it's a very good card, and I'd definitely run 1 or maybe even 2, but I might board them out depending on how like hyper aggressive, and just board it out with like a 1/4, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're playing against Boros, that deck can just amass a huge board state pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And then the 2 mana suddenly, or the 2 life is like, oh, actually, that's like a really big deal. That's like possibly the margin of taking an extra turn or not.
Right.
And that might be what pushes me over the edge.
How did everyone feel about the guild-specific mechanics? It's like, from my position when I was watching, you surveilled a lot. I was amazed by the density of surveil you had. But like Convoke was very straightforward. It was easy to see the value from that. Undergrowth, again, very straightforward. Creatures in my graveyard, payoff, that makes sense. I didn't really get a good feeling for how Mentor and Jumpstart worked. How did you feel about those cards? How did you evaluate those cards?
Jumpstart, I felt, was very conservatively applied in the card design. I think maybe Wizards was a little concerned about its power level and is a little gun-shy about casting spells from graveyards.
So this isn't like flashback.
No, it's
It's a fairer flashback?
I think it's a more interesting flashback, honestly, because discarding cards is useful.
It's true.
Especially when you're discarding other Jumpstart cards, right? That's a very straightforward thing, right? Jumpstart feeds itself. I opened 3 direct currents in my pool. I thought they did fine work. I realized that a lot of people online, when evaluating this card, compare it to Lightning Bolt.
Which is, well, I mean,
It's
that's
like,
very
well, I mean,
unfair.
Yeah, it's like, well, that is a thing you can technically do, but why? I think it's a fine card. You get Goblin Electromancer out, it casts for red. It can go to the dome, it can hit a creature. It Jumpstart allows you to at least feel a bit better about top-decking land late game.
Which is usually the bane of decks like this.
Well, yeah, the blue-red Spells Matter deck works in this format, and I think Jumpstart is an important component of that because you're able to get additional value off of your instant sorceries, right? Jumpstart doesn't necessarily need to be good. What it needs to do is do something and also let your Piston Fist Cyclopses attack. Or let your Fire Urchins swing in for more power. Or give additional power to your Crackling Drakes. It doesn't need to do that much, right? It needs to do something. I would like it to be maybe a little bit better, but I think it does fine work in a deck that synergizes as much as the Izzet deck needs to.
Surveil has been pushed a lot. It is on so many of the Dimir cards. And I think that is because Surveil is great for Izzet and great for Golgari. And I think that they were maybe very concerned that, Wizards has a tough job. But the last, Dimir in Return to Ravnica were not very good. As somebody who loves that guild, I felt...
Cypher.
And it was just really tricky to pull off, and like all the good Cypher cards got taken by other guilds. And you were playing against Boros was in that expansion as well, and you try to set up this very slow, very tricky, because you Cypher and print it onto a creature, and it would be like this little house of cards. And code onto, and you just Boros would just punch you, or like cheap removal.
Hey, do you want to suit up your 1/1s? With these expensive instants and sorceries while Boros is stepping on your throat?
Or while Gruul is blood rushing things.
Wow.
It was a dark time, but I feel like just looking at through I had just so many instances, and I ran almost all of them, but they're all very good because anytime you can do card selection is fine. But like just for like there is stuff like there's the Dimir payoffs for Surveil. Like you have the Dimir Spybug. Whenever you Surveil, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, which is fine. Like it's good, and like no one's gonna take that from me. and it's got menace and flying. So
that card seems very good.
you get that out early. I think that's great, and it's a payoff for being in those two colors and being able to do that. But just for example, like you have Sinister Sabotage, which is basically cancel, but you get a surveil. There's no reason Izzet doesn't want to run that, especially to deal with something that they can't burn out. Dimir Informant, which is probably a great card for that for your kind of deck too, because it's just a 1/4, get you some surveil and unexplained disappearance. And then there's a bunch of like black, like the deadly visit surveils, but it's also the removal spell that Golgari is probably going to take. I think they just wanted to make sure that Dimir would have enough ways to power up the cards that only they care about, even being sort of nibbled at from the edges by the other two guilds. And I really appreciate that they did that.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned in a podcast a couple of weeks ago that Surveil looks just fine to both Golgari and Izzet.
Yeah.
And my concern trying to draft specifically Dimir is that all of my cards will be predated by the other guilds.
Yeah, exactly.
As just being useful. But having now played the Izzet deck, I don't know if I care about counter spells.
Really? You think you're just
the
going
Izzet deck, finally, I think Wizards knows how this deck needs to work. I think having Nivik Cyclops in Dragon's Maze worked really well, and they looked at that card and were like, okay, this is actually how this deck needs to work. It needs to have these like 1/4s that can absorb a blow early in the game. And then once you've built up a critical mass, get enormous and turn sideways.
Right. Like what the deck wants to do is shock, unsummon, not hold back, counterspell. Because you want that alpha strike turn. You don't want to be reactive.
Right.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And it feels much more like a burn deck.
Yeah.
I think
That's what
Dimir
Blue Red
wants,
Spells wants to do.
yes, well, it wants to count to 20, right? I think Dimir is much more on the tempo strategy.
Oh, absolutely.
And Izzet is much more on the, like there's many different flavors of aggro, but Izzet definitely wants like the turn 5 alpha strike.
Oh, yeah.
So another card that really impressed me, if I could keep talking about how much I love my blue-black deck, because I loved it a lot, was Whispering Snitch, which I only had one of, but I feel that there's so much surveil in the set, because like we said, it keeps it from being cannibalized too badly by Izzet and Golgari. Works very well. It's a 1/3, so it gums up the ground and prevents Boros from like just punching you and running you over while you're like getting your stuff together. And I found the Boros creatures are a little less powerful off the top. There's a lot more 1/1s.
Yeah, they try and go wide a little bit more.
A little wide. Well, plus like you want low power for Mentor, but it also means that you don't die immediately.
Sorry, what else does Whispering Snitch do though?
Oh yeah, Whispering Snitch. When you surveil for the first time each turn, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life, which is a very small effect, but like I feel like it could put in some work.
Yeah, especially if you have a lot of surveil in your deck. Going back to that Notion Rain example from earlier, if you have something like this and you're surveilling a lot, then you're able to get that life cushion and gain some of that back.
I think
Well,
go ahead, Cam.
this reminds me a lot of Vampire Neonate from M19.
Oh yeah.
Only that 1 pip of power is really important because this guy can pick up like a Glaive of the Guild pack later on and get in there.
Yeah.
But it also discourages a lot of the low power aggro creatures from swinging in because Boros is really, really rewarded for holding on to its creatures. It does not want to throw anything away.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't want to crash its 3/1s into this.
No, it just sort of says, nope. That's a big old stop sign, which is exactly what a deck like this needs to get off the ground.
Well, how many surveils? How many times did you surveil in that one game? Did you hit 20?
We got up to, between me and Sam, although I was
okay.
doing most of it, but I think we got up to 18
That's
in our
incredible.
match.
Wow.
This surveil count. I think Whispering Snitch does a great job of showing how they want the mechanic to be played, which is sit back and sort of attrition your opponent out. This is not an explosive mechanic. This is not something that's going to try and kill your opponent very quickly. This is something that's going to generate value over time, and I think this card is an indication of where the playstyle lies.
Yeah,
Right.
that's why Sinister Sabotage is good in the Dimir deck, but not good in the Izzet deck. And in fact, they tell you that with the art, because the art is an Izzet guy being sabotaged by a Dimir guy. So it's like Wizards knows what they're doing.
Yeah, it's like
Interesting.
don't let this happen to you.
Yeah, don't run this card. This one's not for you. Izzet players.
I didn't even think about that in the art. Oh, that's so funny.
That is funny.
Yeah, typically the art does have clues for how you're supposed to be playing the deck. If you can if you're not like me and all you care about is the CMC in the top.
That facial expression is, oh, this is not going in the report.
Oops.
This is not going in the report.
No.
There was a black cloud. Really? What did it look like? Just black cloud.
Smoke?
Yeah, smoky, I guess.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about small creatures, but now let's talk about big creatures.
Yeah,
Segue.
I was just gonna point out Siege Worm, because if you're looking for a card that's going to give you an indication of how your deck is supposed to play, it's the Siege Worm, which, by the way, is a reprint from original Ravnica. They brought Convoke back. They brought this creature back too. It's a 5/5 with Trample. It costs 5 green, but it has Convoke, so if you have a lot of smaller creatures, you can use them and get this out sooner than that.
How did you feel about this card? Because like a 7-mana 5/5 doesn't necessarily, with Crumple, with the Convoke Trample. I don't like. I look at this and I have a hard time evaluating it. How much did Convoke pay off for you in this?
It paid off pretty well. I mean, the deck has a lot of different ways to make tokens. We saw Tristani earlier. There's also a common, I forget if it's common or an uncommon, there's a 2/2 that lets you pay 5 mana to make 1/1s with lifelink, the same as Tristani. So there are a lot of those 1/1s running around. So having those creatures lets you bring this out earlier. Another thing about those 1/1s, though, they really gum up the ground a lot. And so, Graham and I were playing a Selesnya mirror match, and that game was such a board stall because we were both just making 1/1s and we didn't really have a way of getting damage through. And he ended up winning the game just because he had a Siege Worm and a way to pump it. Might of the Masses is the card in this set that lets your creatures get +1/+1 for each creature you control. And so if you have any creature with Trample, for 1, right? It's so good. So if you have any creature with Trample, that's a really great way to break through those board stalls.
Well, and interestingly, I feel that Selesnya, from what I noticed, has a lot of late game mana sinks.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get into you've got 10 creatures, maybe your opponent also has 10 creatures or has creatures that are just in the way.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I'll get there eventually.
Yep. Yeah, we talked a lot about upside bears during the pre-release. One of them is Devkarin Dissident. This is a 2/2, and if you pay 5, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And you can pay that any number of times. So if it's late in the game, you're flooding out, suddenly it's a 6/6. So bears in this format are actually going the distance, which is really cool to see.
How's your removal in Selesnya? How did that feel? Were you just expected to have bigger creatures in Rumble, or did you feel like you had a lot of answers?
I felt like I didn't have as many answers as I would have liked. I had 2 Preyapons and I had a Luminous Bonds. And Luminous Bonds is actually pretty good against any creatures that have abilities that maybe trigger if something goes to the graveyard, like against Golgari. Like if you want to lock down a creature and make it so they can't just block with it and get in their graveyard and then trigger Undergrowth. Luminous Bonds is really, really good for that.
It's really good against that Selesnya uncommon as well. That
Exactly.
dies against 2/2s.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Graham actually played that in our match against one of those creatures, actually. But in general, a lot of the Selesnya decks seem to revolve around combat tricks. Graham had a ton of combat tricks, and I felt like I was playing more at sorcery speed with Preyapon and Luminous Bonds, and so I felt like that kind of gave his build of the deck a bit of an advantage.
Right. So you think that as an overall, Selesnya is not necessarily worried about removing creatures before combat. You just want to remove them in combat.
Exactly.
Overwhelming power and size.
Yeah, and I suppose the instant convoke spells also have a special premium.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because they allow you to leverage your vigilant creatures more.
Well, pacifism's got to be kind of hard to evaluate in this set because of Convoke. Because all of a sudden, in another set, pacifism, you just ignore that creature for the rest of the game, but the ability to still get value out of tapping a creature for mana is...
Actually, judge question. At Uncommon, I saw that there is a white enchantment aura. For 1 white, it says target creature cannot attack, activated, and its abilities cannot be activated.
Can you tap it for Convoke? I think
Can you tap it for Convoke?
I need to know what the name of that card is, and pardon me as I pull my phone out on
Paul.
stream.
Are you able to find that one for us?
We'll come back to
Yeah,
that.
I'll go in the tank here and I'll look this up really
But
quickly.
speaking of late game mana sinks, you
Oh,
had
There it is.
demotion. There it is.
demotion. Never mind.
Oh, it can't block.
Sorry, yes, I knew it was one of those. I thought it was can't attack.
All right,
but
give me a
it
second.
can't
I'll
block.
jump in when I'm ready on that one.
All right, but let's come back to demotion when Serge has had a chance to process it. But I want to talk about it's pass something. It's the 1/3 for 2 in blue.
Oh, yeah, pass wall
yeah.
adept.
Yeah. Oh, that
Yeah,
card is so
speaking
good.
of being able to punch through board stalls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 1 in a 3, or 1 in a blue for a 1/3 human wizard. 2 in a blue, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So, yeah, if you were up against a Selesnya deck, say, and you need to punch through with, an Ophidian, maybe you want to draw a card, maybe you need to punch through with lethal with a Piston Fist Cyclops. This is going to solve a lot of problems for you, and it's a big threat. Like 3 toughness is actually a bit hard to deal with. It doesn't die to dead weight. It doesn't die to burn. The common burn spells. There are like
You got to use a real spell on this card.
Right.
Yeah.
You had to use a real spell on this card,
I
didn't
did,
you?
yeah. I had to use Prey Upon to get rid of this when Sam had this Beast Whisperer engine going on, and I would have really liked to kill the Beast Whisperer because that would have
took
let
over
him.
the game.
Yeah, it did take over the game. He drew 4 cards in a turn once. It was so good. It was so good.
He was living the dream.
He was.
Oh,
I was.
God.
I was really jealous just across the table. Like, wow, I wish I were drawing that many cards. But there was a turn where I was at 6 life, and he had enough power on the board to kill me with that pass wall adept if he had just activated it targeting 2 creatures.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, I'm dead if I don't do this. So I had to cast Prey Upon targeting the pass wall adept when I really wanted to get rid of the Beast Whisperer instead.
That's kind of like, that speaks to how powerful a card like that is just to close
Yeah.
out late game. It's like, board stalled out. You got like 7 mana though. You can just slap this guy down. You can use their ability right away too.
Yep.
You don't have to tap it. This is very good. And then if you have 6 mana, you can use it twice. And I think that will, if you even have like 2 medium-sized creatures, the game's been going on for a long time. That's a serious threat.
Yeah.
I can circle back to that judge call.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the wording was correct on it, and in this case, you can still tap the creature
Okay, yes, because
for
it's-
convoke.
it's activated abilities.
Yeah. It's the specific wording on both demotion and convoke. So demotion shuts down that creature. For convoke, you're actually using it to pay the other costs.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Okay.
so if you can't use an activated ability, what's an activated ability, Serge?
An activated ability is something that has a colon in
Oh.
it. So typically it has cost,
Yeah.
and then there's a colon. So for example, the card we were just talking about, that's an activated ability. And that's how you separate the 2 things.
Okay.
So
interesting.
pay a thing, there's a colon, do a thing. That's an activated ability.
Yep.
That's different from, say, a triggered ability is when an event happens, do a thing. There's no colon in those examples.
Right. Interesting. So you want to demote a past wall adept. You don't want to prey upon it if you don't have to.
Well, you want to get rid of that card however you can.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are 2 good answers to get rid of this card.
The last time I remember seeing something like this was in Battle for Zendikar, and it was a Merfolk, a 2/1.
Oh, and it was
yeah.
5 for that
Yeah.
ability,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah, and even
Coral
there.
Helm Guide?
Yeah.
God, that's the
Wow,
one.
yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
good call.
I played a lot of that format.
I liked it.
And that was a fine card there.
Well-
So knocking 2 off the ability cost and making it a 1/3, so it's
Yeah.
much more resilient.
Yeah.
It's good.
I don't think this card would have been nearly as good at a 2/1. I think that would be very bad.
Well, I thought of that card when I first read it as there's a card recently printed. I think it was a 2/1, and for 3 it makes itself unblockable. And I was just like, no, that's not good.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh wait, no, target creature. That will end games. It's like holy moly. If you have that in your Izzet deck and you make if you make one of your grow creatures suddenly unblockable for the turn, GG.
Well, I mean
Yeah.
that was the basis of the old Izzet Blitz deck from Return to Ravnica Standard,
Yeah.
where it wanted to like Boros Charm a Nivik Cyclops, and then what was the unblockable from
Artful Dodge.
Artful Dodge?
Oh
Yeah.
right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it
then-
has flashbacks, so you can do it
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah, and then even before that, there was a Kiln Fiend deck that wanted to use. Oh, it was from Rise of the Eldrazi, but it made it unblockable.
Oh, it's
And it had-
colorless as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it had
Oh,
the
Distortion Strike.
Distortion Strike, right? So this fits into a very proud blue-red lineage that now works. It works.
I'm really sad the one Spells Matter card from RTR didn't come back, which was the Catapult. Deal 1 damage to a player anytime you cast a gold card, untap it.
There is a similar
It was
card,
like a
which
1/4
is
or whatever.
there is a similar card now, which is a 1/5 that doesn't have Defender that makes an illusion burb every time you
really?
cast an instant or sorcery.
What card
Yeah.
is that?
It's Mumbling Adept or something like that. It's implied that this guy is walking along the streets and he's being followed by a swarm of illusion birds and he's talking to himself or muttering adepts, something like that.
It's a 5-mana creature, though?
4.
4-mana creature.
We're putting Paul through his paces. We're finding these cards because we don't know the names of them.
The set just came out. I think we're doing
The
great.
set didn't even come out
Yeah,
yet.
right.
Pardon me.
Yeah, this is the pre-release. We are the meta right now.
We are the
One
meta.
card I'm sad we didn't get more charms. But I'll live. No charms, I'll live.
Oh, there we go.
Actually,
Murmuring Mystic.
Murmuring
Yeah.
Murmuring
Mystic.
Mystic, that's the one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uncommon?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a verbing wizard.
Oh, wow.
That-
Yeah.
I knew that part.
Rumors
This
float
is the-
through the city like crows, alighting on citizens seemingly at random.
Seems great for your deck.
Holy moly.
Yeah, holds down the ground and then accumulates incremental advantage. I think this is probably a bit better in the Dimir deck because the turn that you are casting 3 instances or sorceries in the Izzet deck hopefully is the last turn of the game.
Well,
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
the Dimir deck that is casting like Notion Rain, another surveil spell, countering your thing and building up like
or just
1/1s.
removal.
Yeah.
Yep. Right?
I think gets a lot more value out of this, but this does do work in the Izzet deck, or it does have the potential to do work.
I feel like with the Dimir deck, a lot of the surveil and like a lot of that kind of stuff I want to do is actually staple to a creature, which is kind of nice. But yeah, like you're running a couple Sinister Sabotages, you're running as much removal as you can get. Like, you're very, yeah.
One card I actually think that I was excited to see for the Dimir deck, I didn't get to play it, but I opened it, is Thoughtbound Phantasm. 1 blue for a 2/2 spirit with Defender. Surveil, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and when it gets 3 counters, it can attack as a 5/5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right? This reminds me a little bit of Jace's Phantasm from like M13, which was like a 1/1 for 1.
Yeah.
And then
Unless.
yeah, unless you did the thing that you were supposed to be doing, in which case it became like a 5/5 with fun. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
This card was very cool.
I liked that card. I had that card. I had a Thoughtbound Phantasm.
Did it work?
I never got 3 counters on it. But because if I cast it early, then it sat there and you got to serve. It was a 3/3 almost immediately when I cast it, and then boy did it ever do a great job of stopping stuff. And then once it's a 3/3, I was happy to trade it off for just a bigger creature, that would otherwise give me trouble. Because I had other things going. I think the 3/3, I think the Defender that can get incrementally bigger and just keep you alive is great. And then if you don't end up having to kill a creature, then you can turn it sideways. I think it's fair.
I have an interesting question here. We've talked about how versatile Surveil has been, how the Izzet deck wants it, and how the Golgari deck wants it. With the Selesnya deck, did you feel as though you wanted to borrow from Undergrowth or Mentor at all, or did you feel fairly rooted only in Convoke?
I think Undergrowth could have been helpful in certain instances. I mean, that mechanic is really strong, and a lot of the time, especially if you have that creature that replaces itself, the Centaur,
Sure.
then you're going to naturally get creatures into your graveyard over the course of the game anyway, and so something like that is really valuable. With Mentor, I was actually a little bit underwhelmed because Mentor does better in decks that have a lot of small creatures. So for example, I put 2 copies of Parhelion Patrol in my deck, thinking, okay, it's a 2/3 flyer for 4, which isn't bad, and it has Vigilance, so good for Convoke. And it was decent
And it
in
also has
my
Mentor,
games,
yeah.
exactly, but the Mentor clause never came into play because all my other creatures were always bigger than it.
Right. The Selesnya deck is more about convoking your creatures to get even bigger creatures out, so Mentor's kind of a...
That's
Right.
interesting because you had so many token creatures that you figured the Mentor would have been relevant ever.
Well, I think
But I wasn't attacking with them a lot.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
the Selesnya deck spends a lot of its time hanging back until it can get a critical mass.
Exactly.
And then just alpha strike in, and it's like, well, I'm going to deal 28 damage to you.
And also, and at that point, turning a 1/1 into a 2/2 is nice,
Sure.
but not as critical for the Boros deck as it is for the Boros deck, which I think lives or dies by how well it curves out.
Exactly.
Interesting. It could just be sort of like the bias from the decks we're playing here, but we're definitely very like, surveil was great.
No,
And-
Surveil it's an all-singing, all-dancing mechanic. It's a crowd pleaser. I think it's really well developed. It synergizes well in any deck that can splash for blue or black. It's a really well-designed mechanic.
I mean, there's no situation in which you don't want to be able to like look at the top 2 cards of your library and be like, "Oh, crumbs, 2 land,
Yeah.
get in my bin."
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of Scry and Theros, where you could just add it to another card. You could have counter target spell Scry 1 or something like that, Surveil 1.
Magma Jet.
Exactly.
Yeah, like Magma Jet, like what red player doesn't want to scry to?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, oh, yes, please.
Card selection in red.
And like, I mean, I think a lot of credit has to go to the design team that worked on
Yeah.
this because we I think rightly congratulated ourselves for not making too many mistakes when we were playing with a fairly complex set. But really, a large part of that is probably due to the cards just being designed in such a way that they are easily parsable and they make sense, right, and aren't confusing.
And the design leads you along the right path.
So along that lines, let's talk about the last 2 mechanics, which we haven't touched on at all, because there are 7 mechanics in this set.
Oh, yeah.
And so we talked about the 5 for the guild. The other 2 things we have are split cards and hybrid mana.
Right.
I mean, hybrid mana, I think, is just such a natural fit that you don't even
Okay.
think about.
I love
Yeah.
hybrid
I
mana.
love it too.
I love it so much.
Much in the same way that Crackling Drake, like these we discussed the double costed guild uncommons
That make
were
you
a payoff for the
dedicate,
guild.
yeah.
The hybrid mana ones, like Piston Fist Cyclops,
Yeah.
is always coming down on 3, no matter what you are. Like, if you are Harden Izzet, then you can always cast this. There is a Dimir one that is like a rogue of some kind,
It's-
a spy.
It's Golgari Death
it-
Touch one is another
Yes.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 3/2 with flash, and it's like Night Veil. No, it's like Watcher something. It's like he's going like this,
It's like whispering something.
whispering
something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are they
whispering
all,
something.
Oh no, because the
Yeah.
Fresh Face Recruit was a 2-drop. I was like, are they
Yep.
all 3-drops?
Yep. No,
But-
there's a
Whisper-
Selesnya
Whisper
2-drop.
Agent.
Whisper Agent. There
Yeah.
we go. Yeah, but
what a good card!
this is a
Yeah,
good
it's
card.
good.
Yeah, but Boros has a 2-drop with that gets first strike on your turn.
Yep.
Fresh Face Recruit, and then Selesnya has one as well. It's a 2/2 with Vigilance.
Oh right, yeah. It's just
Oh,
a bear
yeah,
with
yeah,
upside.
Yeah.
That seems like great for that. To just I always feel like Selesnya gets a lot of creatures with vigilance.
Yep.
Well, because otherwise, like I found previously when I'm Convoke's not my like favorite mechanic. I don't like the go big green white things. Much rather be doing underhanded stuff. But I always feel like having to tap your creatures for Convoke like means that you're taking a turn off attacking, which is always such a big drawback, right? Especially if you have big creatures and you want to attack, right? Like how shields down are you going
Right.
to do that?
Well, like, vigilance is always just such a feel-good mechanic too on creatures with abilities. Like, what was the card? The werewolf from Innistrad? It was the Little Red Riding Hood analog.
Oh yeah.
That flipped into a mana dork. That with vigilance, and I was like, yes, yes, vigilance mana bears. I'm happy.
Let's talk about split cards though.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't have any.
Yeah.
Did you?
I did not. The one takeaway I had about split cards was that you have to be very careful how you hold them, lest you give
Yeah.
away
Oh,
that you
that's
have a
so
split
funny.
card.
Yeah, the whole joke of everyone's just like, what
Yeah.
do I have in my hand here? You know, really
like,
great poker face.
I think we should all be like this. This is going to fit into the meta where, much like in Avacyn Restored Limited or Avacyn Restored Constructed, everyone would just like draw their card and look at it first, whether you were playing Miracles or not. Right? It's like, is this like
Everyone's going to be putting their library to the side.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you can pick it up and look at it if it's right face or double face to
Yeah.
not give anything away. Well, it's like that. It's like in Legacy or Modern where somebody draws a card and immediately looks at the graveyard. You're like, nice Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah.
Right? Like those,
Yeah,
those
where
little
you're like-
tells you have.
Yeah.
That's the first time you've looked at your graveyard all game. You've either drawn a Snapcaster or a card with Delve. Like
right.
those
I did
little
that.
tells.
Every time I drew like the Molder Hulk, which was like a black, it was a Golgari card, but I was just splashing for because it was like a 9 mana 6/6
Yeah.
or something like that, but it got cheaper for every creature in your graveyard. So every time I drew it, I was just like, and I'm like, well, people know what I have now.
Yeah, the grand old tradition of top deck. What? How much life are you at?
Yeah. How many cards in hand? You're like, great, nice mind twist.
Yeah.
Right? Like those interesting tells.
Thank you, Paul. Scorn Villager. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she flips into a vigilant mana bear.
Mana Wolf, please.
Mana wolf. Yeah.
So you get to attack, and then main phase you get to add 2.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it made me happy. It made me happy. Vigilance makes me happy. It's one of my low-key like cards, like mechanics that I really think is undervalued. So I had Invert and Vent.
Ah.
Yes, the every judge's headache going forward. I imagine this one was famously, or hopefully famously, by this point, errated to add the word until end of turn.
On the invert side, yeah.
I asked for clarification around this, and Allison helpfully informed me that whatever other effects are applied, like i.e., say you cast Invert targeting Fire Urchin. Fire Urchin gets +1/+0 for every instant or sorcery cast that turn.
So it becomes a 2/3.
Yes, but the order in which this goes, she told me, this is not a matter of stacking your triggers. What happens is that it gets the +1/+0, and then, no matter what else happens, then power and toughness is flipped. Power and toughness flips always occur last.
Interesting.
Good to know.
So I'm like, oh, well, cool. That actually, like, I mean, that's not the ideal effect. I would have liked to have a 4/1, but this is, this is much clearer, right? I don't want to have to, like, explain this to opponents or have them explain it to me or have to call a judge every time. If we
Layers.
Yeah, it's a layers issue. So
I mean, this is why we have judges at the pre-pre-release, because
Yeah.
it's
Power toughness things. I could not tell you this one in order. This is a not a blind spot, but a place where it's like, this is why I'm glad I always have my phone on me for all events, so I can look
Yeah.
these things up on.
well, yeah, I mean, like it's the great thing, like the stories about like Einstein being asked a question. He's like, let me look that up for you. And they're like, what, you don't know this? And you're like, I don't need to know this. I'm part of a huge organism called a library of human knowledge.
yeah.
I don't need to have this at my fingertips. I'll look it up.
Also, there's a difference between being able to figure things out and being able to recall things.
Yeah. And
Actually, I want to be a little bit more clear on this card before we move on, because we touched on it, but we weren't like explicit.
Oh, yeah.
Invert has a typo on it. The card is supposed to say switch the power and toughness of. Hold on. Switch the power and toughness as each of up to 2 target creatures, and it is supposed to say until end of turn. If you go to your pre-release and you open this card, know that that is how the card works. It does not do that permanently. It has been errated, but the cards will continue to have a typo in there. So
Yeah.
know this going forward.
it's one of the few cards in recent years that actually has been errated, right? I can't think of any off the top of my
I
head.
can't either, yeah.
But yeah, this is fun. I didn't wind up running it because I only had 1 Fire Urchin, and then Piston Fist Cyclops already is bigger power, and I was hoping my Crackling Drakes would get up to higher power. I was gonna board this in if I wound up being against the like the Dimir deck that just drops 0/6s.
Sure. And you're
Right.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I've used this to kill your wall.
Yeah, it's like what was it? Reflecting Pool to kill, not Reflecting Pool, but there's a spell that does this that's used to kill Spellskite.
Yeah,
in Modern.
yeah. Some flip card.
Yeah, but erratic Cyclops would be the ideal target for this, where it becomes an 8/1 and just like, punches you so hard in the
Pow.
chest a light turns out
Yeah.
2 doors down.
So not a lot of split cards in at this group of humans. Say.
No, I mean luck of the draw, right?
Sure.
Is there?
Just as a quick question, how often do you think you would play, like, say, a split card, play that card in Dimir, like just use it for the hybrid mana on one half of it,
invert. For me, probably I would never run this.
Yeah.
But like,
or like use this card in Izzet, or
I mean,
Selesnya for that matter.
This is the Boros example.
Yeah, I think these are probably marginal unless I'm missing some application with them where these cards suddenly become busted. But like the hybrid mana cost, I think on them is nice that it's there.
I think it's to give you flexibility to use that half early in the game.
Yeah,
right?
like the other, like the rare Izzet one has a fork effect for 2 hybrid Izzet mana, and then a kind of like a Sphinx's Rev on the other half. Only it's a fireball instead of a life gain spell.
Yeah.
And that's cool. I want to play that. And then there's also this other fork ability that you can probably use as like on a card that or a spell that costs 4 or less mana.
I think for these, the same way that for the uncommons that are for the guilds, they did a pretty good job of being like, well, this is sort of designed that you want this in Boros, but really not so much in Selesnya.
Right.
Like, you know, you want that in Izzet, but it's like way less good for Boros or for Dimir, right? Like I think it's just a nice design where it's like you get the cards that, like, you can probably pick this up like sort of a little bit later in pack 3, like maybe that's a 3rd pick because the 2 people next to you aren't in that guild and they're like, that's sweet, but it is so off my game plan at this point.
Yep.
Ship it on over. So I think that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's about it for time, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's wrap us up here, and is there any one, like I've talked about so much, and we've all talked about, but has anybody got like a card that they just thought was A+ great, or similarly a card that perhaps did not live up to their expectations in their deck?
I want to talk about the Golgari Lich. Because that was a very interesting rules question. So 5 mana Lich for 3 in Golgari. It's a 4/3 zombie elf shaman.
No.
You all right? Yeah. If you would draw a card, instead look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. It also has an activated ability, pay 4 life. It gains indestructible until end of turn, and then tap it. There are a lot of judge calls about this card. It is a very powerful effect. And I think this actually segues nicely into my judge message to everybody. There are a lot of very powerful cards in this set. There are a lot of very powerful effects in this set. Take your time reading what all of them do.
Yes.
And if you have any questions whatsoever on how something works, call a judge, because it's easy to make mistakes and it's easy to assume you know how a card works, only to later turn out that you were incorrect and have to make a public apology to 5,000 people.
That seems like it came from a real place, Serge.
Yeah.
What about you, Hallie?
So for underwhelming cards,
Ooh.
I think I had World Soul Colossus for that. It's an X spell. So it's a creature with X green white in its mana cost. It enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. There was a card that was similar to this in Return to Ravnica, which I think was really, really good because I think it may have had Populate on it, and so it was able to make more creatures and make itself bigger. But this one just kind of came down, and like I was saying, it was kind of hard to get creatures through these board stalls, and so having Siege Worm, which had Trample, was a lot more relevant in more games, whereas this one just sort of got chump blocked a lot.
Sort of became a big old dork.
I wonder if this wanted to be like X and then Selesnya hybrid mana.
Yeah,
If being 1 CMC cheaper would have made it slightly better.
that could be.
For sort of like, well, I'd say underwhelming.
Wayfaring Temple, there we go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. See, but like that is just 3. And if like that's just, well, I mean it's rare, so it's different rarity, but yeah, that seems much better. But I had a Thief of Sanity, which is one of my on-color rares. I opened it. I was very excited to play it, and then it got removed immediately every single time, or somebody would put up a blocker, and then just like, well, I'm not letting that through ever.
So what does it do?
It is a 2/2 flyer, and when it deals combat damage to a player, I can look at the top 3 cards of that player's library, exile one of them face down, and put the rest into their graveyard, which is like, depending like who you're playing against, could be good or bad. But that for as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it, you may cast it, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. So it only needs to connect once, but boy, did people never want to let this thing connect. It just got removed immediately. So I could not tell you if that effect is good or not because I never got to try it. But for cards that I thought were very good, I didn't start with this in my main, but I definitely boarded it in depending on the matchup, was Disdainful Stroke.
Oh, yeah.
Which is 2 mana instant, counter target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater, which obviously you don't necessarily want to start this main board because if you're against the Boros, you're probably just wasting a card slot. But for a Selesnya deck or a bigger or something or like a Golgari deck that's trying to resolve really big creatures that a Dimir deck has a hard time dealing with, this was great. Or like because the removal is all like 4 mana and up.
Yeah, on like turn 5, the Selesnya deck taps out everything to put in a worm.
Yeah, you're like,
and just like you get rid of their big dork and their entire board is tapped down.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Then you do. Well, and I used this against Sam to get rid of his beast. I countered his because it's 4 or greater, which sort of 4 mana seems to be the sweet spot. That's what all the uncommon guild sort of representatives are at. That's what his beast caller or whatever it was.
Whispering, whatever.
Beast Whisperer.
Beast Whisperer that drew him like 1,000,000 cards.
Yeah.
That's what that cast for. So like I feel like I said, I don't know if this is necessarily main board, but I think it's a really good card to have in the sideboard depending on the matchup and just be aware of that. Because typically like you're not really like wanting to commit to leaving mana up for counter spells, but I think in the Dimir deck it's fine, especially at 2 mana. That's enough, right? Like that's cheap enough that it can do some work for you in a particularly bad matchup. What about you, Cameron?
I just wanted to give a shout out to the All-Star Curve in the Izzet deck. Not a single card, but a pattern of playing cards where you can go like Fire Urchin turn 2, Piston Fist Cyclops turn 3, Crackling Drake turn 4, and your opponent's like, I'm in trouble. All I want to do is play things on creatures on curve and then like have an explosive turn 5. And there's just a wealth of these good creatures in Izzet that synergize with each other. Like maybe you don't pick up a Fire Urchin, but you've got a Goblin Electromancer.
That's
Also
nice.
good.
Yeah.
I mean, fair with upside. It doesn't get the benefit, but it does enable a lot of strategies. Maybe you don't have Piston Fist Cyclops, but you do pick up Wee Dragonauts.
Wee.
Crackling Drake, though, you get these. Prioritize these.
I kind of wish the flavor text just said we.
Yeah. And then, have an explosive turn 5 and put your opponent on notice. Wizards did it. They made a creature focus deck that I'm really excited to play.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the power level in this set seems good. Seems like a powerful and fun set to play where you get to do the kind of things that you want to do in your guild, which is always a feel-good mechanic. Even if you don't win, you're like, well, I got to put so many cards in my bin.
Magic.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You played an interesting game of Magic, which is like, I feel the goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and all the strategies feel powerful. So really, if Bolus is coming, GLHF.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up. So thank you so much to Serge and to Hallie and Cameron, and I guess also to me and Paul. We were here too. But if you have enjoyed this and you thought this set looks cool, please check out your pre-release, which is coming up next week. And it's a very fun format. And thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everybody.